Bonjour everybody, this is Pat from Feed Your Brain, and it is time to dive into the second voyage of the famous explorer Jacques Cartier. If you missed our previous video, go check it out and then come back to know what happens next. When Cartier and the natives who came back from the New World with him told the King of France about what they knew, the king decided to give the navigator the opportunity to complete his explorations the following year. He received 3,000 pounds, 3 ships called La Grande Hermine, La Petite Hermine, and l'Émerillon, and a crew of 110 men. Donnacona's 2 sons, Domagaya and Teignoagny, would be part of the trip as promised. Cartier left Saint-Malo on May 19, 1535. He arrived in the Saint-Laurent Gulf after a long crossing of 50 days. With the help of his 2 native guides, Domagaya and Teignoagny, he resumed his explorations where he had left them the following year, following the north coast of Quebec and planting a new cross just west of Natashquan. On August 13, Cartier finally realized that he had succeeded. Before him was the sea passage he had been looking for all along. The 2 native guides identified it as the mouth of, quote, the Great Hochelaga River, which becomes narrower and leads to Canada, end quote. Funny anecdote, Cartier thought that the word Canada, which is actually pronounced Kanata in Iroquoian, meant that this was the name of the country that he was entering, but in fact it's not the case at all. This word simply means village. Going up the Great River, he came across a very deep and rapid river that flowed from the north. His guides explained to him that it was the road to the Saguenay, a great kingdom about which he was told wonderful stories. On September 7, he reached the Orléans archipelago, and it was there that Donnacona awaited them in a village called Stadacone, near the site of present-day Quebec City. He anchored at the mouth of the Saint-Charles River. The village of Stadacone was a typical Iroquoian settlement. People lived in imposing longhouses, and the entire village was surrounded by a very high wooden palisade. Iroquoian nations had mastered agriculture and were sedentary. They grew several things, such as corn and pumpkins. Despite the initially warm welcome, relations between the French and the indigenous people became increasingly strained. Cartier wanted to continue exploring to the west, but Donnacona forbade it. He did not want the French to come into contact with a rival village and wanted to secure his monopoly on trade with France. Ignoring Donnacona's wishes, Cartier left Stadacone on September 19 aboard l'Émerillon. He reached a village called Hochelaga on the island of Montreal on October 2nd. It was another Iroquoian-style fortified village near a beautiful mountain that Cartier named Mont-Royal. The French received a most cheerful welcome from the inhabitants, who seemed to take them for shamans. In fact, the sick were brought to the French so that they could cure them. Cartier read them a few verses from the Gospel of St. John, which to the natives probably sounded like magical incantations. Cartier continued his exploration of the river, but his advance was quickly stopped by the Lachine Rapids. The natives explained that other rapids followed these, but that further away was a river from the north which flows into the river and leads to the gold and riches of the kingdom of Saguenay. They were undoubtedly referring to the Outaouais River, which Cartier would never reach. To this day, the Lachine Rapids stop all kinds of ships from traveling west on the Saint Laurent River, which is why several channels were built in the following centuries to allow boats to reach the Great Lakes. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's get back to 1535. Upon his return to Stadacona, Cartier found his men building a fort on a site called Sainte-Croix. The inhabitants of Stadacona pretended to be happy to see him again, but Cartier quickly realized that relations with the natives had cooled considerably. The weather soon did the same, and the French discovered for the first time the rigors of the Quebec winter. And they were completely, but I mean completely unprepared. If you've ever spent a winter in Quebec and you're from warmer climates, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is absolutely nasty. I mean, it's rough. And it was even worse in the 16th century without central heating or electricity. It was frozen hell. To everyone's surprise, the great river froze completely, trapping the ships in a thick layer of ice. The snow reached 4 feet or more of height, and to top it all off, an epidemic of scurvy erupted among the French. By mid-February, only 10 of Cartier's 110 men were still healthy, and 25 had died. The natives were, of course, completely healthy and untouched by this disease. Cartier wanted to discover why, but he did not want them to know that the French were so weakened. By cunningly questioning Domagaya, he finally managed to discover the secret of the remedy for scurvy, an infusion rich in vitamin C made from aneda, a local conifer, possibly white cedar or balsam fir. Crew members who drank this concoction were completely recovered in just a few days. In the spring, Cartier prepared his voyage back to France. But before leaving, he wanted to strengthen France's position in the Saint Laurent Valley. Judging that Donnacona and his sons were increasingly hostile, he figured that the chief's rival, Agona, would be a better ally. So on May 3rd, he literally kidnapped Donnacona and his sons and decided to bring them back to France. To appease the inhabitants, he promised to bring them back the following summer. Cartier set sail on May 6th, abandoning La Petite Hermine because he did not have enough men to crew the ship. In all, he brought about 10 Iroquoians back with him, including 4 children who had been entrusted to his care the previous fall. He was back in Saint-Malo on July 16, 1536. This second trip was much more successful than the first one. Cartier now knew the geography of the region and its people much better, and he brought back with him an old native chief, Donnacona, who had unending tales of the splendid wonders that could be found in the kingdom of Saguenay. In addition, he was convinced that at the end of the Great River was this famous passage to China that Europeans had been looking for. Now, sadly, Cartier could not come back to America the following year for reasons that I will explain in our next video. But he will be back for a third and final voyage, and you don't want to miss that, guys. So come back, subscribe, give us a like if you enjoyed the video, and that being said, I say au revoir, see you later, guys.